Hello, my dear friends. After 21 years of dedicated service without a single complaint, I was discarded like an outdated machine. No warning. No thank you. No one even looked me in the eye. It all started with a short email on a Monday morning, no explanation, just a brief request. Please report to the 18th floor conference room at 9:15 a.m. The 18th floor didn't send casual messages. I knew something bad was coming. They thought I'd stay silent. They assumed I was just some obsolete IT guy past his prime. But they forgot one thing. I built the system they're still using. And I had seen things they never wanted anyone else to discover. They thought firing me would cover their tracks. But what they actually did was start a war they couldn't win. If you've ever been cast out from a place you gave your heart to, this story is for you. It was a gray Monday morning in Seattle, like the sky itself sensed what was about to unfold. I, Marcus Hale, 52 years old, walked into the glass tower of Vantage Communications, the company I had called home for more than 2 decades. Coffee in hand, I nodded at the security guard like I always did. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I entered that building as an employee. Barely 10 minutes after powering on my computer, a notification from HR flashed on the screen. Marcus, please come to the conference room on the 18th floor at 9:15 a.m. Be on time. No explanation. No pleasantries. Just a cold instruction. My heart slowed. Having managed the company's internal systems for nearly 20 years, I had seen enough to know, when you're summoned to the 18th floor, the news is never good. And I was right. In the brightly lit conference room sat the HR director, a lawyer from legal, and no CEO, no direct supervisor, no one to represent the years of commitment I had given. Marcus. The HR woman began in a memorized, robotic tone after reviewing our current organizational structure and the company's new direction toward digital transformation. We're forced to terminate your position, effective immediately. I gripped my coffee mug until my knuckles turned white. We appreciate your contributions over the years. But your role no longer aligns with our future direction. No longer aligns? I built the company's first internal network when we had just a small office on Capitol Hill. I hand-coded the first internal email system, one they still use to this day. I stayed overnight in 2012 when a data storm nearly crashed our servers. I was the only one who fully understood every layer of data architecture and every security gate on our network. I almost asked, do any of you even know the root password to the mail system? But I stayed quiet. No anger. No protest. Just a deep, tired sigh. They handed me an envelope. Inside were the termination papers, a printed thank you, and a number, 3-month severance. You may return to your desk to collect your personal items. Your system access has been temporarily disabled. I almost laughed. Temporarily disabled? I was the one who built the access controls. If I wanted to, no one would be able to access anything, at least not without me knowing about it. I walked out of that room and headed slowly to my old office. The avoidance in my coworkers' eyes stung more than the termination itself. No one asked questions. No one wished me well. They all looked down at their screens, pretending to type. I packed my things. A family photo, a ceramic mug with Mr. Firewall printed on it, and a little cactus I'd been growing since 2005. Somehow still alive under the relentless office fluorescent lights. Marcus, a choked voice called. It was Tori, my desk mate from support. I just heard. I can't believe it. You're the one keeping this building alive. I smiled softly. It's okay, Tori. Technology changes. As I stepped out of the office, I passed CEO Harold Vance in the hallway. He glanced at me for 2 seconds. No nod, no handshake, no farewell. Just walked past as if I'd never existed. If one day, the people you trusted turned their backs on you, what would you do? Walk away quietly or come back silently? I drove away from the company lot under a sky that seemed to melt into the same shade of injustice I felt inside. At home, I sat in my personal office, everything still in place from those long nights I spent fixing their back-end systems. Andrea, my wife, peeked in and asked gently, home early today? I looked at her and forced a half-smile. I've just been given an extended vacation, sweetheart. That night, over a dinner that barely had 10 words between us, I found myself alone in my study. Desk lamp illuminating every familiar object. Everything in that room was a relic of the years I gave to that company. Architecture diagrams, handwritten notes on a whiteboard, backup drives. Notebooks from the days before Jira and Slack. I opened the small safe tucked into the corner of the room, where I kept sensitive documentation gathered over the years. Don't get me wrong, I'm not some paranoid hoarder. I just know that sometimes the most overlooked details are the keys to protecting a system or protecting yourself. In my hand was a black USB labeled Legacy Logs. Inside were complete internal access logs and security analyses from the last 3 years. I had always maintained offline backups ever since our system was breached back in 2016 when I proposed building a parallel offline recovery system. That proposal? Budget reallocated. Then I remembered something odd. A small detail that had been bothering me for months. Back in March, while checking payment records for third-party security software, I noticed a line item. Apex/Nexus Services External Security Auditing. I had never heard of this partner, and the amount was even stranger, $62,480 for low-level infrastructure consulting. Something I had been doing. For free. I started digging into internal financial reports I had saved in an old email archive. Fortunately, I had kept a copy of the C-level shared folder, where execs would often toss spreadsheets back and forth. One Excel file stood out. FI21_Q4_audit request_final XLSX. It listed 4 irregular payments to Nexus Applied, totaling nearly $260. 000, all labeled external consulting. All directly approved by the CFO. I dug deeper. Audit logs for the accounting system showed these entries were overwritten by an admin account, an account with access held only by 3 people. Me, Daniel the CFO, and Paul, the former finance manager who resigned last year for personal reasons. Personal reasons? I opened up our last email exchange, dated 11 months ago. Marcus, thanks for the heads up. I get it, but I don't want to be involved. I'm taking some time off to think. Let's grab a beer sometime. Then Paul vanished from the company. I found his LinkedIn. He now works at a nonprofit in Vermont. He knew too, but he walked away. I couldn't. I continued digging into Nexus Applied. Website? Non-existent. Registered address? A UPS mailbox in Redmond. Legal representative? Sophia Burns. The name sent a chill down my spine. Sophia wasn't a stranger. She was Harold Vance's niece, a recent interior design graduate who had zero background in technology. I had met her once at the company Christmas party, where Harold proudly introduced her as a young entrepreneur launching her own startup. Launching, yes, but what kind of startup? A shell company? Created just to drain funds through fake consulting contracts? The more I uncovered, the clearer it became my termination wasn't some random outcome of corporate restructuring. It was a targeted move, because I was the last person left who understood the internal systems well enough to notice the financial irregularities and expose them. The clock read 2:08 a.m. I stood, poured a glass of water, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Half my hair had gone gray, my eyes dark and tired, but for the first time in years I felt alert. They think I'm an old relic in IT, but they don't know. I've mirrored every move they've made inside the system. I opened my personal laptop and created a new folder. Vantage_internal_compliance, Nexus_audit. I began categorizing the data. Mapping financial links. Logging system architecture. Highlighting timestamps for altered logs. Creating a preliminary plan, not for revenge, but for restoring the truth. Do you believe the truth always finds a way to rise? Or does power always win in the end? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. As daylight crept through my home office window, a different kind of light was burning inside me. Truth. I had the skeleton. Now I needed the full picture. I searched Nexus Applied in the state's business registry, and there it was. Legal agent Sophia Burns. I narrowed my eyes. That name wasn't some coincidence. It was Harold Vance's own bloodline. I remembered seeing her 2 years ago in that bright red dress at the Christmas party, beaming while Harold introduced her as a rising startup star. But nobody ever asked what she really did. Nobody cared until now. The listed address for Nexus was, again, just a UPS store. No office. No employees. No digital footprint. Yet over the past 18 months, Nexus had received over $1.8 million in payments from Vantage. I accessed a sandbox testing account I had set up years ago for development. By some miracle, or rather, by IT negligence, it hadn't been deactivated when they offboarded me. With it, I gained read-only access to archived financial files. I compared the Q4 budget report to the actual payment logs. Each Nexus invoice had been approved by CFO Daniel Foster, and the descriptions were always vague. Security strategy consultation. Application infrastructure audit. But I knew I had handled those tasks personally. No outside vendor had ever contributed. These were phantom services. Ghost invoices. A funnel for embezzlement. I retrieved old emails from backup, including threads with Paul, the ex-finance manager who left suddenly last year. His last message said, "Marcus, I know what you're seeing, but when your CEO is also the uncle of the partner, there's only so much you can fight. I needed peace. If you dig deeper, be careful. Good luck." Paul had seen the rot. He chose silence. I couldn't. I grabbed a red marker and started sketching connections on the whiteboard. Sophia Burns, owner of Nexus, applied. Harold Vance, CEO, Sophia's uncle. Daniel Foster, CFO, approved the payments. Victor Liu, head of operations, signed off on service contracts. Paul, finance manager, who walked away. Each line circled back to the same point. Nexus wasn't a vendor. It was a siphon. I went deeper, checking metadata on PDFs shared between Sophia and Daniel. One file titled invoice_April 2022.pdf was created using a free invoice generator. No real company ID. Just a username in the file's metadata, SophiaB_89. I searched social media. It wasn't hard to find Sophia's Instagram. A post from last April caught my attention. "April's been amazing. Closed my first deal. I'll never forget how it feels to finally get paid for being my own boss." Paid for what exactly? That caption sounded like a confession. I saved everything. Every IP address. Every login timestamp. Every invoice trail. Everything I'd already collected over the years. I was no longer the man they had fired. I was now the one holding the blueprint of a rotten financial empire. I stood by the window watching the Seattle rain begin to fall, silent and steady. Like the truth. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. But once heavy enough, it can soak through steel and tear down the tallest tower built on greed. "I don't need to blow anything up," I whispered. "I just need to let the truth shine." I opened a blank document. Typed the first line. Objective. Not revenge. Restoration. And I knew then, a new game had begun. I'm not the kind of man who rushes into battle. I've worked in systems long enough to know winning isn't about shouting louder. It's about placing your data where it hurts. My next step wasn't to email Harold or Daniel. We weren't on the same battlefield anymore. I wasn't an employee seeking explanation. I was the last person they should have tried to silence. What I needed now was someone with influence. Someone outside the corruption but still inside the circle of power. I thought of Brandon Liu, a senior independent board member, former CTO of a global tech firm. A man of few words, but the only one who'd ever looked me in the eye during our 2018 cybersecurity overhaul. Back then, he'd once said, "Marcus, you're one of the few people in this company who understands silence can be a system too." I decided to reach out, but not via any official channel. I created a new email account under a spoofed internal domain. Marcus@vanag3-corp.com, just enough to appear familiar, but untraceable to corporate logs. Subject line: "Brandon, you need to read this before Friday." Kept it brief. I've discovered financial misconduct involving Nexus Applied, a shell company tied to the CEO's niece. Large sums are being funneled through fake contracts. I'm not asking for anything. I only need you to verify what I'm sending. You and only you. Attached was a single PDF file, just enough to trigger suspicion. A flowchart of the transactions. A log of administrator edits in the finance system. Metadata from altered invoices. Nexus's company registration showing Sophia Burns. No full archive. Just a teaser. 3 hours later, a reply came from an encrypted private email. "Marcus, meet me tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. No devices. Gas Works Park. North Bench by the lake. No tech. No trace." He knew this was serious. The meeting. The next morning, Seattle was draped in fog. The kind that clings to your coat like a secret. I arrived 10 minutes early. Sat on the north bench of Gasworks Park, overlooking the quiet lake. At 9:30 sharp, Brandon appeared, no suit, just a khaki jacket and a canvas hat. He walked over, sat beside me, no handshake. No small talk. Just one question. How many people know? Counting you? 2. He nodded slowly, then asked. You kept access to everything even after being let go? I didn't keep it to blackmail anyone, I replied. I kept it to protect what I helped build. I handed him a small black USB drive, an encrypted copy of the core evidence. He didn't plug it in. Just slipped it into his jacket pocket. He looked out over the lake. Do you want to come back? I took a breath. No. I don't need a job title. I need justice. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll go through everything. If what you're saying checks out, I'll bring it to the board myself. Lighting the fuse. I left the park both calm and tense. Like a man who had just placed the dynamite and now waited to see if the match would catch. Back at home, I took one more step. I logged into an old testing email account I created years ago for system authentication trials, an account tied to the company domain but not visible in any active directory. Invisible, but functional. I composed one final message. To all 12 members of the board of directors. Subject. Before you approve Q2 bonuses, read this. Attached. An 87-page PDF. Every fake invoice. Every shady payment. Every admin login trace. Nexus's incorporation documents. Sophia's social media footprint. Metadata from internal communications. Pro. Of Daniel Foster's account was used for unauthorized edits. I ended the email with one simple line. I'm not asking for reinstatement. I'm asking for this company to be clean. And I scheduled it to send at 8 a.m. Friday morning, precisely 30 minutes before the quarterly board meeting, when they'd be voting on executive bonuses. They wouldn't be able to ignore it. They wouldn't have time to sweep it under the rug. 8 a.m. Friday. I sat on my porch, warm coffee in hand. Seattle's skies were their usual shade of indifference, gray, heavy. But inside me, it was already blazing with light. I opened my laptop and checked the outbox. Sent. It couldn't be recalled. It couldn't be silenced. And I knew just a few blocks away. A boardroom was about to implode. 8:17 a.m. First call. A 206 area code. I didn't answer. Let voicemail take it. Not out of fear, but because in this moment silence was power. 8:29 a.m. A text buzzed from Steven, the junior IT analyst I had mentored. Marcus, what's happening? They just froze the financial systems. Daniel got called into legal. Someone said there's a report. Is this you? I didn't reply, but deep down a part of me ached. Steven deserved better, and now maybe he'd get it. 9:00 a.m. The boardroom lights would now be flicking on. PowerPoint decks half loaded. Faces pale as page 1 of that report lit up the projector screen. They'd see the names. Nexus. Sophia, Daniel, Harold, and eventually, they'd all look toward Brandon Liu holding the USB. And someone would ask, is this real? And when he nodded, the storm would begin. 9:36 a.m. A black SUV pulled up in front of Vantage Communications' glass tower. 2 men in suits stepped out, each holding a sealed evidence bag. The security cameras blinked, unaware of the magnitude about to unfold. The press didn't know yet, but I did. The financial investigation unit had arrived. Brandon didn't just forward my file to the board. He activated a full-scale independent audit. 9:54 a.m. My landline rang. An internal number. Patricia Graves, head of legal at Vantage. I picked up. Mr. Hale, we need you to come to HQ immediately for a discussion. Not necessary, I replied. Everything I know is already with the board. What you did may constitute a breach of confidentiality. I never signed any NDA post-termination. And if you want to go to court, I'll be ready with system logs, original files, and verifiable evidence. Who do you think the investigators will come for first, Patricia? Silence. We're looking to cooperate, she softened her tone. I already did. The rest is on you. 10:15 a.m. A new message from Steven flashed across my screen. Daniel's been suspended. Sophia's being questioned. Harold didn't show up at the office. Rumor is he's wiping files remotely. 10:22 a.m. Brandon called. I answered on the first ring. Marcus, everything you submitted checks out. The signatures, emails, transaction logs, they're airtight. I know. Harold's refusing to respond. Daniel's blaming Sophia, and she says she was just following her uncle's instructions. Classic. When the ship sinks, everyone suddenly forgets they ever had a map. We've initiated a third-party review of all consulting contracts from the past 3 years. There may be more than just Nexus. There is one other, Orion Metrics. I haven't traced it fully, but early signs show it's another ghost company. You have details? Give me an hour. I'll send everything. That afternoon, I sat alone in a small diner 15 miles outside downtown. No one knew where I was. I ate my usual beef stew, flipped through the local paper. Front page? Not yet. But in the business section, sources suggest Vantage Communications may be under formal financial investigation tied to suspicious vendor payments. I smiled. Truth doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs the right weight at the right moment. Later that day, a rival tech firm called. Word had gotten out I was no longer bound. They offered me a role, Chief Information Security Officer. Double my last salary plus stock options. I politely declined. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because I had unfinished business. 6 p.m. An email popped up from Brandon. The board meeting has concluded. Harold has been temporarily removed pending investigation. Daniel is officially suspended. Sophia has been ordered to turn over all financial records. I read to the last line. The board wants you back. Not in your old position. In a new one. Senior level. Reporting directly to us. I closed the laptop. Leaned back in my chair. The storm had landed and shattered the hollow bones of a corrupt empire. But now came the part most forget. Rebuilding. Monday, 7:45 a.m. For the first time in over a month, I stood in front of Vantage HQ. Not as the old, discarded IT manager, but as Marcus Hale, summoned by the board. My coat bore a fresh visitor badge. Mr. Marcus Hale, visitor. But everyone knew I wasn't just visiting. The receptionist, who once bowed for Harold every time he passed, looked up, eyes respectful. Welcome back, Mr. Hale. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the top floor. In my 21 years, I had never been here. The executive suite. The kingdom in the clouds. I'd spent 2 decades in the server rooms, under flickering lights and fans that never stopped spinning. Today, I was about to enter the room where decisions shaped thousands of lives. The boardroom was quiet. 12 members sat spaced around a walnut table, most looked tired, even shaken. Only Brandon smiled as I entered. At the head of the table stood Ellen Park, interim COO. She extended her hand. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hale. I shook it. Cold. Firm. As you're aware, she began, the board has voted to create a new executive position, Chief Information Security and Ethics Officer. You will oversee all digital infrastructure, IT budgets, and corporate ethics. You will report directly to the board, not the CEO, not the CFO. I scanned the room. These were the same faces that had once let me walk out unnoticed. Now they were waiting, hoping I'd say yes. I slid a folder across the table. These are my terms. Not many, but non-negotiable. Ellen opened it. I watched her eyebrows rise. Veto power over all IT expenditures. Unrestricted audit access to any department. Anytime. Authority to form an independent team outside existing staff. Final say on any executive decision violating ethical standards. Another board member, Mr. Patel, cleared his throat. Don't you think that's excessive? I looked him dead in the eye. Fraud happened because no one dared cross a line. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen again. Silence. Then Brandon said softly, I believe he's earned every one of those rights. 11:45 a.m. I left the boardroom. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Brandon's gaze follow me, not stern. Not urgent. Just quietly certain I would do what needed to be done. That night, Andrea sat beside me in our living room, reading. Something happened today? She asked, eyes behind her glasses. They want me back, I said, with more power than ever. She paused. Will you take it? I leaned back. That question had haunted me all night. Returning meant control, visibility, but it also meant responsibility. What do you think? I asked her. Andrea put her book down and took my hand. If you're going back to control others, be careful. But if you're going back to protect the good ones, then you have my full support. Wednesday, 9 a.m. I officially started in my new role. My nameplate read, Chief Information Security and Ethics Officer. I had the highest level of access. My badge opened every room. Every email I sent carried a new signature. Executive Officer, Ethics and Security. But I didn't begin the day in a corner office. Instead, I headed down to the tech floor. Stephen nearly dropped his coffee when he saw me. Marcus? Is that really you? I need someone I can trust to help manage system operations, I told him. Would you be interested? He froze. Are you serious? I'm still junior. You've got what it takes. All you need is someone who sees it. Have you ever just needed someone to believe in you? If so, comment below. I know how that feels. On my way back upstairs, I passed the hallway where Daniel's office used to be. The door was locked. The nameplate gone. Just an empty space. No power. No presence. Just a reminder, power fades when held by the wrong hands. That night, I posted to LinkedIn, no one is born to rule. But sometimes we must rise not to dominate, but to protect values long ignored. The first month in my new role swept by like a storm. I moved between boardrooms and server rooms, auditing, documenting, rebuilding. What Daniel and Harold had left behind wasn't just financial rot, it was a culture. A culture where loyalty was punished and truth was buried beneath polished PowerPoints and flashy titles. The first round of internal audits confirmed what I'd suspected. Nexus Applied was just the beginning. 2 more consulting firms had received funds without providing any actual services. One of them was registered under Sophia's college roommate, someone with no background in cybersecurity or IT. Total initial damages, $5.2 million. Harold was now under federal investigation. Daniel was seeking a plea deal. Sophia had vanished from all social media, as if she never existed. I didn't feel victorious. No satisfaction. Just quiet. I spent more time downstairs with the engineers. Not because I had to, because I wanted them to remember why this place was worth saving. Stephen was now managing the tech team. I saw that spark in his eyes, the same spark I once had when someone believed in me for the first time. The server room no longer felt like a dungeon. New lighting, potted plants, fresh air. People talked again. They smiled. They trusted. They knew someone was watching, not to punish, but to protect. One quiet Friday afternoon, I got home earlier than usual. Andrea was in the backyard, trimming the lavender. Her hands were dirty, but her face glowed. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. You've been quieter lately, she said without looking up. Because I'm not angry anymore, I replied. We sat together on the garden bench, the same one where we'd once planned our first road trip. The same one where I'd pulled all-nighters fixing database crashes. Are you content? She asked, her eyes on the flowers. I thought for a moment. Not happy necessarily, but satisfied. Not because I won, but because I didn't stay silent. The following Monday, I received an email from Brandon Liu. The board met again. Based on the findings, they've approved a significant increase to the cybersecurity budget under your authority. They'd also like you to help shape our long-term strategy, especially the internal culture. A month ago, I was considered obsolete. Now, they wanted me to design the future of the company. I agreed on one condition. Every quarter, there will be an open forum between staff and board. No HR filters. No chain of command delays. Just raw conversations. Brandon replied in less than a minute. Done. The first forum was held a week later. I stood in a small company auditorium, facing nearly 60 employees. Some I knew well. Most I didn't. I didn't give a speech. No slogans. No corporate buzzwords. I simply told them a story. A man worked for 21 years and was fired for knowing too much. He could have lashed out, but instead he chose truth. The room was silent. I ended with a simple line. I didn't return to rule. I came back to make sure if you ever see something wrong, you know you have the right to speak up and someone who will listen. And if you ever thought you were too small to make a difference, remember, I was once just a forgotten IT guy. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was real. No cue cards. No coaching. Just people clapping for something they knew was true. That evening, I went home and pulled out the old chart, the one where I mapped out the fraud. I folded it, placed it in the back of my drawer. Not to hide it, But to close the chapter, I opened LinkedIn one last time and wrote, "Not everyone will remember you saved a company from collapse, but you'll always remember you refused to stay silent when it mattered." The next day, Andrea and I had dinner at a small bistro in the old town, the same place we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. She ordered wine. I stuck with tea. We talked about simple things. The coming spring, lawn care, our daughter's upcoming graduation. Halfway through the meal, Andrea gently took my hand and looked me in the eyes. "I'm proud of you." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, then turned my gaze toward the rain-slicked street beyond the window. There were no more CEOs. No HR meetings. Just me. And a different kind of future. 2 months later, the financial scandal at Vantage Communications officially closed with charges filed. Harold Vance, the once untouchable CEO, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for embezzlement and financial fraud. Daniel Foster, the CFO, received 2 years probation and a 10-year ban from holding any financial leadership role. Sophia Burns, Harold's niece, cooperated with investigators and avoided jail time, but was ordered to return every dollar received through the fraudulent contracts. The story was splashed across every local business paper, but none of it really moved me anymore. I had already closed that chapter on my own terms. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was clear for once. A soft light filtered through the curtains. I brewed myself a cup of coffee and stepped outside onto the porch. Seattle's air still had its bite, but the cold no longer felt heavy. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Brandon. "Marcus, it's done. Thank you for choosing to speak up." I replied simply, "I just did what was right, and I know you did too." Andrea came out to join me, settling into the chair beside mine. She looked off into the distance, then asked softly, "What are you going to do next?" "Nothing special," I said. "Just keep doing good work, like I always have." She smiled, warm and proud. "Then that's enough, Marcus. Sometimes the greatest victory is returning to who you truly are." That day, I did something I never imagined myself doing. I wrote a letter to Harold Vance, the man who had betrayed me. It was short. No anger. No accusations. Just this. "Harold, I'm not writing to blame you. I'm writing to say I've forgiven you. Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry the weight of hatred any longer. I hope you find peace. Marcus Hale." After I dropped it in the mailbox, I felt weightless. Forgiveness didn't make me weak. It made me stronger than ever. The following week, I returned to the company like any other workday. Things were calmer now. Board meetings no longer carried dread. Employees had begun to see me less as a watchdog, and more like a peer who genuinely cared. One afternoon, Stephen walked into my office with a small cactus in his hands. "I heard you liked cacti," he said, a little shy. "So, I got you one." I chuckled, accepting the little pot. "Thank you, Stephen." He lingered, then said quietly, "Marcus, thank you for believing in me. Without you, I don't think I'd be where I am today." I looked at him, and in his eyes I saw the younger version of myself, 20 years ago, just waiting for someone to say, "You've got what it takes." "Stephen," I said, "everyone needs someone who believes in them. The best thing you can do now is be that person. For someone else." He nodded, smiling, then turned to leave. That evening, Andrea and I had dinner at another familiar spot. We sat by the window again, watching the world pass by. Everything felt normal again. But I knew I was no longer the same. "Do you still think about them?" Andrea asked gently. I knew who she meant: Harold, Daniel, and Sophia. "I do," I answered honestly, "but not with anger. I think about them to remind myself that in life, every choice has a cost." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You made the right choice, Marcus. That's what matters most." After dinner, I drove slowly through the city. The lights shimmered on the wet pavement. The jazz on the radio hummed softly in the background. Somewhere between the rhythm and the road, I realized something. I had finally let it all go. Not because I had won anything. Not because I stood on top of any ladder. But because I had chosen to be myself. All the way through. When I got home, I opened my laptop and posted one last message on my personal page. Life sometimes places us in unwanted storms, but how we face them defines who we are. I chose forgiveness not because I'm weak, but because I'm strong enough not to let the past control me. The comments started pouring in. Old colleagues, friends, even strangers who had followed the story. But one reply stood out. Marcus, your story gave me the strength to speak up at my own company. Thank you for showing me that truth, even when painful, is more valuable than silence. I stared at that comment, smiling. In the end, what I did wasn't for revenge. It was for the person out there who needed to know they weren't alone. And with that, my story had fulfilled its greatest purpose. Andrea came up behind me and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Marcus. I looked at her. Eyes soft. Smile steady. I'm proud of me too. Monday morning came with no fanfare. I walked into the office building the same way I had for over 2 decades, only now with a title that carried more weight than any I'd ever held before. Yet the badge clipped to my chest wasn't what gave me purpose. It was what I carried inside. The security guards nodded with more respect than familiarity. I gave them the same smile I always had. Some things didn't need to change. I made my way past the glass conference rooms and polished marble halls and down to the floor that had always felt like home, the tech wing. Stephen was already there. Sleeves rolled up, eyes glued to lines of code. Morning, Marcus, he greeted, sounding more confident than before. Morning, I said, pulling up a chair next to him. Let's do a full scan of the new integrations. If we're going to rebuild culture, it starts from the kernel up. He grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. That week, I met with every department, not as a superior giving orders, but as someone listening. People were hesitant at first, but slowly stories trickled out. How corners had been cut. How ethical red flags were waved off. How silence became the default survival mechanism. I didn't take notes in those meetings. I didn't ask for names. I just listened. And that listening turned into action. By the end of the month, the first of many changes rolled out. A new anonymous reporting system, co-managed by external auditors. Quarterly town halls open to all staff. A revised code of ethics, written in plain English. A promise printed on every break room wall. Speak the truth, even when your voice shakes. Late one night, I found myself alone in my office, the only light coming from the glow of my monitor. On the screen was a draft of a new onboarding document titled Welcome to a Culture of Integrity. I stared at the title for a long time. Then I clicked save. The next morning, I took a walk to the old server room. Most of the equipment had been replaced since I was last in there. But the hum was still the same. The heartbeat of the company. I ran my fingers along the side of a rack I had personally assembled years ago. A tag still hung from one of the rails, installed by MH. I smiled to myself. Not out of nostalgia, but pride. Not because the system had survived, but because I had. That afternoon, I stopped by HR not to file a complaint, but to ask for a change in Stephen's title. I had drafted a formal recommendation, promote to technical infrastructure lead. He had earned it. The head of HR raised an eyebrow. You sure he's ready? I'm not, I replied. But that's how you know someone is. Before leaving, I added one more line to his record. Believes in the power of quiet leadership. The next day, I handed Stephen the offer letter in a plain envelope. He blinked twice before opening it. He looked up. Why me? Because you listened. Because you questioned. Because you didn't walk away when things got hard. His hands trembled slightly as he tucked the letter back in. Thank you, Marcus. I won't let you down. I know, I said. Just remember what it feels like to be seen. That night, Andrea and I sat on the porch again. She was trimming the ends of a lavender branch and I was sipping tea. Stephen got the promotion. I told her. Good. He deserves it. You think I made the right call? She smiled, not looking up. You didn't just make the right call. You're changing what right even means around there. I leaned back in the chair, looking at the stars barely peeking through Seattle's cloud cover. Do you think I've done enough? She didn't answer right away. Then, you did what most people wouldn't even try. That's more than enough. I nodded, not in agreement but in understanding. A week later, the board sent me a memo requesting my input on a new ethics advisory committee. They wanted me to chair it. I said yes, but on one condition, that it include one junior staffer from each department. Not for show, for truth. That evening, I sat down to write a personal email to every new committee member. In each message, I included the same sentence. Speak freely. This room exists because silence nearly cost us everything. One of the members, a marketing associate named Leah, replied with a single line. I've waited 5 years for a room like that. Moments like that don't make headlines, but they build foundations. By the end of the quarter, Vantage's internal audit team submitted its findings to state authorities. With full transparency. Every dollar misused was traced. Every name involved accounted for. Every process vulnerable to abuse patched. It wasn't a victory parade. It was a quiet reckoning. And in that silence, something else began to grow. A culture that no longer feared the truth. A system that didn't rely on one man to guard it. A company that remembered who it was before the rot took root. And as I walked the halls of Vantage each morning, nodding at faces new and old, I didn't feel like a ruler. I felt like a keeper, not of power, but of purpose. Have you ever felt like your silence was the only thing expected of you? What if breaking it could rebuild everything? Let me know in the comments. Your story matters too. It was a Monday like any other. Except this time, there was no fire to put out, no meeting that felt like a battlefield, no mask to wear for appearance's sake. Just a clear sky over Seattle and a man, me, who no longer carried the weight of unspoken truths. I walked into the office with a coffee in hand, nodding at the receptionist who now greeted me not with protocol, but with warmth. Good morning, Mr. Hale, she said with a smile that reached her eyes. Morning, I replied, then added, call me Marcus. I stopped by the tech floor first. Stephen was already deep into his morning tasks, his team now more confident and cohesive than ever. They no longer looked like survivors. They looked like builders. You're early, I said. Stephen grinned. Can't wait to see the new monitoring dashboard go live. I clapped him on the shoulder. Lead the way. Later that day, I joined a mentoring session for junior staff. I wasn't there to talk about firewalls or encryption protocols. I came to tell a story. I didn't rehearse it. I didn't dress it up. I simply said, I once got fired after 21 years of service. No warning. No explanation. But what came next taught me more than any project ever did. They leaned in, wide-eyed, curious. I continued. I didn't come back to get revenge. I came back to ensure no one else would have to go through what I did. And I didn't do it alone. People like Stephen helped me rebuild this place from the ground up, not with control, but with conviction. A hand went up in the back of the room. A young woman named Joy asked, how do you stay strong when no one seems to care about the truth? I paused before answering. You remember why you started. And you never let their apathy shrink your values. After the session, Joy came up to me with tears in her eyes. Thank you. I've been feeling invisible here. Not anymore, I told her. We see you now. That evening, I found myself in the quiet of my home office, where this entire journey had truly begun. Andrea stepped in with 2 mugs of tea, placing one beside me. You've been quieter these days, she said gently. Because I'm finally at peace. She sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. You did it, Marcus. No, I said softly. We did. I opened a drawer and pulled out the letter I had sent Harold Vance months ago. I read it again, not out of doubt, but as a reminder. Forgiveness had not made me weak. It had freed me. The next morning, an internal newsletter went out to all staff. The final article was titled, Rebuilding with Purpose. A letter from Marcus Hale. It read, every company faces its storms. Ours nearly capsized us. But you stayed. You listened. You spoke. You rebuilt. This isn't a company saved by one man. It's a culture saved by courage. Keep choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Keep holding each other accountable with compassion. And never forget, your voice can change everything. At the end of the newsletter, there was a photo. Not of me in a suit or behind a podium. It was of Stephen, Joy, and the team, standing around a whiteboard filled with ideas. That image said everything that needed to be said. The day passed with the rhythm of quiet success. No headlines. No celebrations. Just a deep, steady current of change moving through every department. That night, Andrea and I went out for dinner to celebrate nothing in particular. We laughed. We reminisced. We sat in comfortable silence. As we walked back to the car, she slipped her hand into mine. Do you miss the old days? She asked. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, the old days were loud. This is calm. And that's what I've always needed. Back home, I logged onto LinkedIn one last time and typed. Some legacies are written in ink. Others are built in silence. I'm proud of the one we chose. I hit post, closed the laptop, and exhaled. It was over. And it was enough. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or pushed aside, know this. Your truth matters. And your silence doesn't have to be forever. Leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll be here, telling the stories that others are too afraid to tell. Goodbye, my dear friends.